Welcome to the Top 10 and 10. I'm your host, Dan Wright, writer at firedoglake.com. Today is May the 5th, 2014, and these are the top 10 news stories. Whoops, start here. Story number 10, this is from Time magazine. Former U.S. ambassador to Moscow warns of war in Ukraine. Michael McFaul, who served as the U.S. ambassador to Moscow until February, warns Russian President Vladimir Putin may be preparing an all-out invasion. The last 24 hours was a major escalation, McFaul told Time in a Friday interview, as Ukraine's military began an operation to reclaim eastern cities and towns taken over by pro-Russia militants. The offensive has led to violence, including reports that Ukrainian helicopters were shot down by pro-Russian forces. Brewing violence in the southern port city of Odessa also claimed dozens of lives. That's when the Kiev-aligned forces burnt or set on fire a building that killed about 38, pro-Russia activists. This is real, McFaul said. This is war. Amid reports that pro-Russia and separatists in eastern Ukraine are urging Russia's military to intervene on their behalf, McFaul says. He's now reconsidering the widely shared assumption that Russian President Vladimir Putin preferred to destabilize Ukraine from a distance without staging a cross-border invasion that would compel the West to take new retaliatory steps, possibly including arming the Ukrainian military. It would be very costly for Russia to invade Ukraine, McFaul said. It will be a real fight, maybe guerrilla warfare for years. That's not something one does lightly, but it got more likely in the last 12 hours. So I guess sort of a major escalation that occurred in Odessa. So maybe Kiev wants it. Who knows? Story number 9. This is a sort of wide-spanning editorial called President Obama in the World. And it's basically a sort of policy paper for the New York Times' view of how the world should work. And it's really quite... they sort of offer what they believe Obama believes with what they believe should occur, taken as a whole and stripped as much as possible of ideological blinkers. Mr. Obama's record on foreign policy is not as bad as his critics say. It's just not good enough. But what they actually want is more militarism. I think that's one of the things that gets lost. And they've also completely misrepresented the opposition to Syria, in which they claim left-wing critics are upset that he's not more involved in Syria. So they say he's not as bad as people. They try to sort of, typical posturing from the New York Times to try to pretend like there's some middle truth that both sides just can't see, but they're wise media perch they can see. So by last week, when he was in the Philippines defensively talking about his inability to affect outcomes in places like Syria, Egypt, and Israel, he offered a sadly pinched view of his powers of his office. You hit singles, you hit doubles. Every once in a while, you may be able to hit a home run. You don't inspire a team to go out and bloop a single over an infielder. American presidents who stood as strong global leaders did so by setting high expectations in clear, if sometimes very overly simplistic, ways. Mr. Obama's comments last week fanned the anger of people on the left and the right who find him unfocused, weak, and passive. So they want bolder discussion. I don't know what New York Times is. I think this is kind of a joke. I'm not sure they understand that it's a joke, but I believe it is. Story number 8. It's from Al Jazeera. Youth sue U.S. government over climate inaction. Young people across the country are suing several government agencies for failing to develop a climate change recovery plan, conduct that amounts to a violation of their constitutional rights, says their lawyer Julia Olson. Their futures are at stake, said the young plaintiffs. Climate change is the biggest issue of our time, said 13-year-old Martinez, a member of the nonprofit Kids versus Global Warming. a plaintiff in the lawsuit. It's not every day you see young people getting involved politically, but the climate crisis is changing all that. Every generation from here on out is going to be affected by climate change. The federal suit, which made its way to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, is part of a groundbreaking nationwide legal campaign spearheaded by youth and backed by some of the world's leading climate scientists and legal scholars. This is a kind of an interesting stunt. I mean, it's going nowhere, but it's pretty interesting. And it is, it's true. Younger people are the ones who are going to have to deal with it. It's not going to be an older people, the elderly will be dead. So kind of a novel approach here. Sue on behalf of the people affected who haven't been affected yet. I don't know how that goes as a common law legal principle, but worth a shot. What do you have to lose? Story number 7. This is from Gallup. U.S. uninsured rate drops to 13.4%. The uninsured rate for U.S. adults in April was 13.4%, down from 15% in March. This is the lowest monthly uninsured rate recorded since Gallup and Healthways began tracking it in January 2008. The uninsured rate peaked at 18% in the third quarter of 2013, but has consistently declined since then. This downward trend in the uninsured rate coincided with the health insurance marketplace exchanges opening in October 2013 and accelerated as the March 31 deadline to purchase health insurance coverage approached and passed for most uninsured Americans. The Obama administration decided in late March to extend the deadline to April 15th for those who had already begun the enrollment process. So, record low rate according to the Gallup survey. Story number 6. Netflix brings net neutrality concerns to U.S. regulators, from Reuters. After weeks of public outcry, Netflix Incorporated brought its concerns about internet neutrality directly to U.S. regulators this week in meetings with Federal Communications Commission staff, according to sources familiar with the matter. The video streaming company has been outspoken. Did I get screwed again? No. Okay, Thursday, May 1st. All right. This is such an on-running battle. I got to check the years on this thing. The video streaming company has been outspoken in its push to do away with fees that content companies pay internet service providers to deliver their video and other data. Consumers, Netflix recently agreed to pay such fees to Comcast Corp. And Verizon Communications Incorporated to ensure smooth delivery of its videos, but it argues they weaken the principle of net neutrality, which says all internet traffic should be treated equally. Netflix representatives brought that message to the FCC commissioner's offices in a meeting with advisors over the course of several days this week, the sources said, as the agency prepares to rewrite so-called open internet rules that regulate net neutrality by setting limits to how internet providers treat web traffic crossing their networks. The sources spoke anonymously because the meetings have not yet been publicly revealed. So Netflix, apparently, a lot of people thought that was a betrayal, but according to this story, perhaps Netflix paid the toll, but is still going to try to lobby to change the rules, which would make that toll payment moot, I guess, in the future at least. So I guess Netflix says, well, we can't afford not to pay Comcast and Verizon for premium service because it would destroy our business model because we pump a ton of content, video streaming service. But we also hate this rule, so we're still going to go to regulators and whine about it. We'll see what happens. Story number 5 from Pando Daily. Docs obtained by Pando show how a Wall Street giant is guaranteed huge fees from taxpayers on risky pension investments. When you think the term public pension fund, you probably imagine hyper-cautious investment strategies kept in check by no-nonsense fiduciary laws, but you probably shouldn't. An increasing number of those pension funds are being stealthily diverted into high-fee, high-risk alternative investments that deliver spectacular rewards for Wall Street firms paid to manage them, but not such great returns for pensioners and taxpayers. Citing data from the National Association of State Retirement Administrators, Al Jazeera America recently reported that the average portion of pension dollars devoted to real estate and alternative investments has more than tripled over the last 12 years, growing from 7% to around 22% today, with public pensions now reporting $3 trillion in total assets. That's up from $660 billion. And yet, despite that fact, they deal with the expenditure of taxpayer money. The agreements between public pension systems and alternative investment firms are almost entirely secret. Until now, thanks to confidential documents exclusively obtained by Pando, we can now see some of the language and fee structures in the agreements between the alternative investment industry and major public pension funds. Taken together, the documents raise serious questions about whether government employees, trustees, and politicians overseeing major public pension funds are shirking their fiduciary responsibilities under the law. The documents, which are involved in a recent SEC inquiry into the $14.5 billion Kentucky retirement systems, were handed to us by SEC whistleblower Chris Taube, an investment consultant and former trustee of KRS. Taube has also written a book, Kentucky Fried Pensions, about the scandalous state of the Kentucky public pension system. The documents obtained by Taube, which are embedded in the story, specifically detail Kentucky's dealings with Blackstone, a giant Wall Street investment firm which has deployed a platoon of registered lobbyists in Kentucky and whose employees are major financial backers of Kentucky U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell. The Blackstone-related documents, though, don't just tell a story about public pensions in Kentucky. The firm, which just reported recorded earnings, does business with states and localities across the country. The Wall Street Journal reports that about $37 every $100 of Blackstone's $111 billion investment pool comes from state and local pension funds. In one set of documents provided by Taube, Blackstone's payment structure is outlined with language guaranteeing that Blackstone will receive its hefty annual management fees from the taxpayer, regardless of the fund's performance. So these public pension funds are getting in bed with hedge funds, which is what these alternative investment vehicles typically are. So that's pretty sketchy. Speaking of sketchy, story number 4, U.S. wants Credit Suisse to plead guilty in tax dispute. U.S. authorities are ratcheting up pressure on Credit Suisse to plead guilty to helping wealthy Americans hide untaxed money in Swiss bank accounts. Swiss newspaper NZZ Sonntag said, the source quoted by the newspaper said U.S. authorities had made, quote, extreme demands, unquote, regarding potential fines and wanted the names of all U.S. citizens who had stashed away untaxed money in Credit Suisse accounts. Washington is asking for a guilty plea, the newspaper said on Sunday, quoting an unnamed source close to the bank. Contacted by phone, a spokesman for the bank declined to comment. Credit Suisse is one of over a dozen Swiss banks under criminal investigation in the United States over whether and how they helped wealthy Americans dodge tax. Pressure on Credit Suisse increased this week as one of its former employees pled guilty to helping U.S. clients avoid taxes. So this could be interesting, the secret Swiss bank accounts, and whether or not they're going to have to stop doing this, stop allowing people to evade U.S. tax law. Story number 3, young blood may hold key to reversing aging. This is from New York Times. 2 teams of scientists published studies on Sunday showing that blood from young mice reverses aging in old mice, rejuvenating their muscles and brains. As ghoulish as the research may sound, experts said it could lead to treatments for disorders like Alzheimer's and heart disease. I am extremely excited, said Rudolph Tanzi, a professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School who was not involved in the research. These findings could be a game changer. Wasn't involved in the research, though. The research builds on centuries of speculation that blood of young people contains substances that might rejuvenate older results. This is sounding very vampiric, isn't it? In the 1950s, Clive M. McKay of Cornell University and his colleagues tested the notion by delivering the blood of young rats into older ones. To do so, they joined rats in pairs by switching together the skin on their flanks. After this procedure called parabiosis, blood vessels grew and joined the rat's circulatory systems. The blood from the young rat flowed into the old one, and vice versa. This is very creepy. So apparently this is this is a solution if you're an old guy and you're looking to in a study published Sunday in the journal Nature Medicine. Dr. Videla, now a faculty member at the University of California, and his colleagues unveiled more details of what young blood does to the brains of old mice. After parabiosis, Dr. Villeda and his colleagues found that the neurons in the hippocampus of the old mice sprouted new connections. They then moved beyond parabiosis by removing the cells and platelets from the blood of young mice and injecting the plasma that remained into old mice. That injection caused the old mice to perform far better on memory tests. How about that? So, eat the young! Story number 2. This is from Pew Research. Midterm election indicators daunting for Democrats. No improvement in perception of job market. With the midterm election 6 months away, Democrats are burdened by an uneven economic recovery. And a stubbornly unpopular healthcare law, perhaps equally important, Barack Obama's political standing is in some respects weaker than it was at a comparable point in the 2010 campaign, which ended with Republicans gaining a majority in the House. A national survey by the Pew Research Center and USA Today conducted April 23 to 27 among 1,500 adults finds that 47% of registered voters support the Republican candidate in their district or lean Republican, while 43% favor the Democratic candidate or lean Democrat. The trend over the past 6 months on the so-called generic ballot shows that Democrats have lost ground. In October, Democrats held a 6-point lead. While a majority of voters say that Barack Obama will not be a factor in their vote, this fall, more see their vote as a vote against the president than for him. So people who are upset with Obama will see this as a referendum. At this early point in the campaign, Obama inspires far less enthusiasm among Democratic voters than he did 4 years ago. You better believe it. So, bad news for the midterms. There's an enthusiasm gap. There's economic pessimism persists. The survey was conducted before Friday's job numbers, its lowest level since 2000. However, more than 800,000 people left the labor force. From the public's point of view, jobs remain scarce. That's the reality. So, there you go. And the number one story, apparently this crashed. Kiev forces commit massacre in East Ukraine. Under the guise of anti-terrorism, forces loyal to the gang in Kiev have launched an all-out assault in East Ukraine. Part of the assault included trying to burn their political opponents alive in the city of Odessa, where approximately 38 people died when a trade union building was lit on fire that contained pro-Russian protesters. The massacre increases the possibility of a Russian intervention as images of the slaughter poured out. Russian President Vladimir Putin blamed the West for the massacre, claiming through a spokesman Kiev and its Western sponsors are practically provoking the bloodshed and bear direct responsibility. The U.S. government celebrated the attacks by claiming they were steps to restore order. There is Ambassador Samantha Power, who actually came to public attention by writing books about the unfortunate side of massacres, saying, in fact, that Ukraine has taken steps to try to restore order and take back territory from separatists is what any nation would do. Even the New York Times has taken a very pro-Western line on the conflict, has had to acknowledge that many of the forces loyal to Kiev are neo-fascists, including those who perpetrated the massacre. Swastikas and symbols were spray painted on the building, along with graffiti reading Galatian SS. Schutzstaffel, the Nazi unit, the Galatian SS were recently honored by Ukrainian nationalists. So there's some Nazis in the ranks there, and they're spray painting buildings after they kill people in them. Today marks another assault by Kiev forces in East Ukraine, this time in the city of Slavansk, where, unlike Odessa, forces from Kiev are fighting an armed militia. Regardless of the outcome, this anti-terrorist operation, questions remain as to how the election that is scheduled to take place in 20 days can really be achieved, and whether it will mean anything. The 25th of May is when this election is scheduled, and it's unlikely to proceed smoothly. Let's put it that way. And that is the top 10 of 10. If you have a story you'd like me to feature on the top 10 of 10, please tweet me at DanSWright, and be sure to read all the stories at firedogblake.com. Thanks for watching. See you there.